Hey, brother, this is the first episode of the joint podcast, even though we each of us has their own show. So, welcome. This is the Durindal HQ podcast. And I guess now, to be honest, we're doing this for ourselves because at the beginning, not many people will be watching. But it's one of those things Gary Vee said, document, not create. So, I guess if we start documenting the journey of this company now, it's probably one of the best things we can do for the future and to look back into what we're building. So, how are you doing, brother?
Man, I'm doing great. I honestly am. It was a long weekend of baseball, and I don't know how it is in Germany right now, but it's absolutely brutal here with humidity. And so I don't know if I'm just getting older or what, but it's like, man, just like even just coaching 8-year-olds outside all day, just kicking my ass, honestly. How about you, man?
I think it's coaching 8-year-olds. That would kick my
Yeah.
ass. Sure. I don't know, man. I had my cousin time ago. I'm visiting, and I was like, he's one of those chill kids, right? He doesn't, he's not annoying. He's not intense. He just has moments when he starts like talking. He's 8. And I was with my family. I told my parents, I'm not ready to have kids. I told my girlfriend, I'm not ready to have kids. It's just, it's too much, bro. So like, imagine a bunch of 8-year-olds that need to be coached into a sport. Kudos to you. But hey, to answer your question, as you know, it's been fine. The book is coming along well, and we had our sales calls last week. It's been a good start to this week. As you know, we had a massive client success just today. So I would say we're wrapping up this day in a great fashion.
Yeah, honestly, like to kind of hit off your point, it does seem like everything is starting to move in the right direction. What we launched Durandal really effectively less than 60 days ago,
Yes.
probably around 50 days ago. It was like right at the beginning of June. And the reception has been amazing, in my opinion. Um, and I think it goes to drive home the fact that when we first started talking about partnering on this business, it was putting two great minds together. Well, at least one. And
Thank you. I'm glad you see me that way.
yeah, well, it's funny because I think back to December and when it was just RevXcel, and I went to Olivia and I'm like, I really want to partner with Seb. And I was like, but he's got his own thing. He's probably just all in on that, and I don't want to bother him with it. And then I think it was like February, I finally came around and approached you about the idea. You're like, I've been thinking the same thing.
Didn't she tell you like you're crazy for partnering with a guy that's in Germany?
Yeah.
Didn't she tell you that?
Honestly, she was because I think, what, how many calls have we had where last year I look back, we had so many calls that were like 4, 5, 6 hours long.
Yes, dude. It's
And
a few of them. I mean, we were talking at some point like at 4 a.m. my time or like 3 a.m. One of those crazy times.
yeah, and I think we just developed like a natural bond of like, hey, we see the world the same way. We share very similar values. We talked really in depth about things like psychology, religion, nothing even really business related.
True.
It's hard to find people, outside of go-to-market context. I love to talk about psychology in depth. We talked about that for 30 minutes yesterday. I love talking about human evolution, human behavior, political dynamics, like how to overcome social pressure, and like having deep conversations where you're going 10 layers deep, you know? That stuff's fun, and you don't get a lot of that anymore. And so honestly, like that was one of the things that really I think kind of sparked my interest was this is somebody I can actually have like real conversations with for hours on end. I might be talking his ear off a little bit, but
It's true. I mean, yes, technically, like thank God we have business before. Thank God we have RevXcel and Hypnotic because that's what allowed us to partner and go through the rebrand and just start looking for clients individually because we could tap into our individual networks while we figured out the positioning and the outreach and the like value proposition of this thing. But now that we have done it, it's been fascinating. I never had with Hypnotic, I never had the amount of traction that we're having with Durindal. Meaning, like the business was fine, but it didn't have that amount of resonance that people immediately get it. They are into it. They want to know more about it. I got people asking me, "Oh, train me here and that." It's been way more. I don't know if for you it's been the same, but it's like we partnered up and things got easier.
for sure. And I think that's just a sign that like it was the right decision in the sense that I think what we bring to the table is, we really take the time to get to know people. And we hear so much, and especially you being on the sales side. Again, kind of going back to like our skill sets and our demeanors play off of each other really well. I'm more of the Midwestern guy that can strike up a conversation in any room. Seb's the guy that can really read the room and figure out, be a little more precise and figure out where the opportunity is, right? I think people really appreciate that. And I think back to some sales calls we've had with other people where it was like, we got off the call and 90 minutes later, I'm like, I just need a moment to think because like I couldn't even get a question in, Kind of, the conversation I had this morning with a potential prospect where it was like, I heard from so and so that you're just an awesome human being. And I'm not trying to toot my own horn, but we've got a few prospects in the pipeline that all came from, okay, what are you going to pitch me? Well, I don't have anything to pitch you. And I think a large part of the reason our approach works is because we don't pitch people up front. Now, if there's an urgent need there, yeah, we'll definitely work that to some degree. But I think people just appreciate the fact that like, yeah, these guys are really on a call, just trying to get to know us. And if the right time comes along, we're going to develop that relationship with you. And when the moment comes where it makes sense to bring us in to help you solve whatever challenge that is, hey, let's have that conversation. That's what like relationship building is. But I think because of the tools we have today, the dashboards, the reports, the relationship building for a lot of salespeople. And to Seb's credit, I don't know if this is the hostage negotiator side of you, PsyOps side of you. Seb's made me realize that my entire career in marketing, I've been a sales guy cosplaying as a marketer. And to that point, there's a salesperson inside of everybody. Thinking about the client that you were speaking about just a couple minutes ago, very hesitant to get into sales, very, abrasive towards the idea of selling. And then just given the right information from, the vantage point of I'm just trying to help you. I'm not trying to make a bunch of money off of you, whatever that is. They've fallen in love with sales in what, a week or two?
In a week.
Yeah.
That's why I think we had this debate in our team last week or in the last 2 weeks. When they tell me, when somebody in our team said, okay, but the sales method is very advanced, like this is a psychology degree condensed in 27 pages. And by the time the book was only 27 pages and it's grown, but yes, it is that much of knowledge in a short like piece of work, will be a book, but it's called Sales with Advanced Tactics, but it's not beginner unfriendly. And we just had the proof of concept with that because up until now, we have deployed SWAT only in experienced people and it works and it has gotten results. But now that we decided to venture into let's test it with these people that don't have a sales background, I wouldn't say it's working better, but it's working just as much. It's like, okay, as long as you give them at the end an MVP version they can deploy, the methodology is perfectly executable by a total beginner and it will get them results, and it will get even better results for a very experienced salesperson that needs to just reframe how they see their craft. So I think, yes, it's been great to see the feedback from both sides of the business aisle, and even you're totally right. Like the thing is, as a marketer, you always care about people and about the audience, and you want to like know how they feel, what they're doing. You care a lot about the ideal customer. And I think that's the best position to start when it comes to sales. And that's why I think you're right. There is a salesperson in all of us.
Yeah, well, marketers have to understand how sales actually works in order to be an effective marketer. And this is my argument when people ask me about Strike is, well, first of all, we have to kind of shift our perspective on like what marketing is. And regardless of how much go-to-market has evolved, in many of the organizations that we talk to or work with, what is the common theme of the relationship between marketing and sales? Sales is about ready to lose their mind with the marketing team because they feel like, hey, like we don't get the level of support that we need in order to close deals, hit quota, etc. And you see this common theme just pop up over and over and over again. And the reason why is because regardless of all the training that's out there, regardless of all the frameworks that are out there, none of those actually address the fundamental way that marketing operates. And we talk a lot about marketing being a recon team. They're out there finding the highest value targets, the highest value opportunities, getting a survey of the land, letting you know where your competitive advantage is, working with sales to build that game plan. And then sales is that tactical execution force, that quick strike force that goes out and executes that battle plan. That shifts the perspective that marketing is a support function. Hey, we're here to support you at this event with a booth set up and some collateral that you can hand out to people. No, marketing needs to be out at the event too, talking to prospects, talking to customers, talking to potential partners in the game. And so much of that doesn't happen. You went to an event a couple months back, and like that was the first thing you were replying is most of these marketing people just stand here and wait for people to come to them. If you're out at an event, for instance, as a marketer, you can go set those conversations up for sales. Instead of sitting in the booth, get your ass out of the chair and go have some conversations.
And you won't be bored, which is the thing that most teams deal with at events. People get bored. It's like, okay, there's 6 of us. We all have to be sitting here the whole day for 3 days. It's awful. But at least if you take turns or if you send the marketers out to do recon, to have conversations, it's a great deal for everybody.
Why is this such a hard perspective shift in the sense that, you could blame it on the college level education somewhat, because I think back to when I was at business school, the way that marketing was presented was very much through the brand lens. But I think marketers, the big shift that's happening and where CMOs that we speak with struggle a lot is, well, the CEOs are starting to care less and less about brand and more about you having an operator's mindset of how everything you do actually impacts the bottom line of the company. And a lot of CMOs that came from that brand background even 10, 20 years ago that are in that CMO position now, part of their argument is going to be, well, not everything we do has an immediate ROI. It doesn't have a tangible ROI. And that's true. There's always going to be that layer of marketing that you can't tie an ROI back to. But there's also that operator's mindset of, okay, well, the other 80% of the activities that we do, we need to be able to tangibly prove ROI here, that what we're doing is actually driving the opportunities for sales. Why is this becoming such a hard perspective shift for people?
I think it's a function of habits. It's how they teach marketing at school. It's the fact that when you work a job, you don't necessarily update your knowledge. You're not motivated to do it. Many companies don't pay for it. You will not go out of your way to start studying what's new in marketing after you do your marketer job for 8 hours a day or 10. That's one side of it. The other side of it is just we are in a dark era of brand, meaning people think we don't need brand anymore because they think of brand as just this intangible thing. But brand is the customer experience. It is the reputation of the company. And brand is ultimately what you need to build over time if you want sales to be easier, right? It's why Gartner can afford to call people and say, hey, it's Gartner. We're looking for CEOs. We're dealing with these, and these pain points. Do you fit that model? The CEO will say yes, and they will move on to a call. They will say no, they will just call somebody else. But that's a type of cold calling that won't work unless you have the brand that Gartner has. And that's where we see the combination of branding and sales, which means when you have the reputation on top behind you, actually, it's a big thing to have for sales. Now, in an era where we are obsessed with measuring everything, you cannot measure brand objectively, not all of it. So I get that it is hard. And that's one of the many reasons why I think we made the right decision in focusing on the frontline execution side of it, focusing on the sales team, the go-to-market team, and the revenue operations. Why? Because sales is the first personal touch point between your customer and your company.
Yeah.
That means by definition that sales is a big driver of what your brand is. What we do with SWAT is not just accelerating ramp time. It's not just teaching you how to increase your close rates. It's not improving just the sales team culture. There are many metrics that we improve with the sales training and the sales coaching. But one of the things that we cannot measure, but that we are improving, say, under the table, is their company's reputation, because your salespeople become way more effective at building rapport, earning trust, and using that to sell, upsell, cross-sell, whatever. So I think, yes, we are in a dark era of brand because we want to measure it. But this could be controversial between brand people, but I think if we start taking care of branding from an execution perspective, using measurable results as a way to back it up, we can then stop focusing on branding as a strategic thing that is just a money dump. I think that's a big thing. But of course, we don't do strategies. Just that's a huge conversation that's not pertinent. It's just my opinion is if you improve the performance and the outcomes of sales and marketing, you are overall improving your company's reputation. You are, by definition, investing in brand.
Yeah. And, you know, kind of just shares some of the challenges that we face is when we talk to a lot of these companies, the perspective is we have a systems problem. The CRM is all jacked up. We need better sales tools. We need better workflows. We need more AI. We need more automation. That's rarely ever the problem. That's usually the symptom. If I'm wrong, correct me. But usually those symptoms show up in the tools. And like to your point about frontline execution, we have to solve for that first. We have a lot of companies that come to us and they want us to fix the RevOps side first. Okay, well, how is your team performing right now? Right? That's always the question we kind of lead with. If your team's not executing at a high level consistently, well, the tools aren't going to solve the fundamental problem for you. At the end of the day, we have to understand how do we get each person to understand what their role in the company is, what the impact of their role in the overall go-to-market motion is, and then how do we actually give them agency and give them ownership to make critical decisions in real time at the frontline level. Because we've both been in companies where you're a marketing manager and you're fighting through layers of bureaucracy for weeks. By the time you get a yes, the opportunity's already passed. And this kind of goes to the internal conversation we've had about how quickly go-to-market evolves now. A lot of this rigid approach to go-to-market comes from there's fundamental flaws in the way that people execute. And one of them that we talk about is how we relay intelligence to the sales team. Again, marketing being a spearhead instead of a support function. So staying out ahead of the sales team and continually collecting the intel that the sales team needs in order to act on opportunities quickly. You know, we still see companies that have 72-hour SLAs. And what's the data points around that or something along the lines of the company that reaches out first within the first 24 hours has an 80% higher chance of closing that prospect, and you're waiting 72 hours in 2025. It's not happening. There's no way. And again, this comes back to your point about your ability to execute is your brand. If you're I just reached out to a potential vendor of ours, very well known in the SaaS space. They're a sales automation platform. It took their partnership team 2 weeks to get back to me. I never replied. They've emailed me 3 times since then. And I haven't replied because I'm like, if it took you 2 weeks to get back to me and you're a sales automation platform, that tells me everything I need to know. You're not even practicing what you preach.
As controversial as some people find like Alex Hormozy, he made one great point in one of his many pieces of content, which is he has one person or more people in the sales team devoted to looking at leads as they come through the pipeline. And the leads get called or emailed the very moment they log in their data.
Yep.
His acquisition.com's team took the 24-hour data point and turned it into like 3 minutes.
Yeah.
And of course, they will get the client because if you react in 3 minutes from where they just put their data, show interest to the point where you have the first touch point, no competitor, especially the kind of competitor that takes 2 weeks to get back, no competitor will ever match that. I will go out on a limb here and say that that piece of advice, even though it is one sentence in a full day or a multi-day workshop, that little piece of advice is one of the things that has allowed our clients to get the most results.
But to your point, how do we, going back to frontline execution, if your people don't have agency and they don't have ownership, they don't have the ability to truly execute, not consistently and not at a high level. And where all of this stems from is what I call like this. You look at the past 25 years, again, with the technology evolution, transformation, this over-reliance on tech, we've now seen like this decoupling of leadership from frontline execution. And so leaders look at dashboards, they look at reports, they look at financial metrics. When was the last time you sat in on a sales call? When was the last time you reviewed some transcripts? When was the last time you reviewed, hey, this is why we lost these 3 deals? What's the common thread there? Because if you're going to set a strategic vision for the company, you have to have that level of intelligence going into how you're adapting to the way the market is evolving. And I think through that decoupling between leadership and frontline execution, we rely so much on directors or VP level people to tell that story. Well, here's the thing about storytelling. If I tell you a story and then you go tell 100 people, I bet if I were to ask that person what the story was, it's going to be totally different than the story I originally told you. And so that's why it's so imperative that leaders find one Friday, one day every month where you go and you go speak to those frontline teams and you figure out what's actually happening when the message meets the market. What's actually happening when that campaign gets launched. I can't tell you how many like marketers I speak to, and it's like, well, we're just running this campaign because like we're dedicated to it for 90 days, but we're getting no results. And we're adjusting the messaging a little bit. We're adjusting the positioning a little bit. And it's all this, it's death by 1,000 cuts, essentially. Hey, if you would have just cut that campaign 2 weeks in when everybody had that gut instinct, this probably isn't going to work out for us. We could have shifted all those resources into a better, higher value opportunity for the company. Instead, we're lagging behind because we're so committed to this thing that we believe we have to do, even though the market and the metrics are showing us this doesn't work for us. So many companies are stuck right there. They don't have what I call a kill switch.
It's a cultural issue, though. It's a
It
cultural
is.
issue because many companies don't have the kill switch because management doesn't give room for one. Meaning,
Yep.
if the CMO is afraid to kill a campaign because management will once again, between the lines, tell them that they're a budget waster and again a slide pusher, and they will cut the budget for next year if these campaigns keep getting cut off, you cannot have a kill switch because then the CMO and the marketing team by proxy are going to feel like their entire careers depend on getting everything right. And when you need to get everything right is when you start scrambling to get to tweak the positioning, to tweak this and that, to put more budget, to change the targeting.
It's reactive. It's a reactive mode of covering your ass. And it just doesn't work.
If you build a culture where people are, yes, well, people are demanded. We demand results from people. But the culture clarifies that the cost of getting results sometimes is killing the things that are not working. That's the kind of culture that wins in 2025 and in the next 5 years, probably. It's a culture willing to accept that mistakes happen.
Yeah.
You cannot not allow people to make mistakes. Otherwise, you're going to create this environment of fear. And again, in this market, it's already very difficult not to avoid that environment of fear because there's layoffs left and right. But if you want to make your team, enable them to perform at the highest level, they need to be able to make mistakes without consequences. Of course, that doesn't mean they're just going to go out there and ruin client relationships or waste the budget, but they need to be able to make mistakes and be able to come to you as a leader and say, hey, I made this mistake, the campaign didn't work. We are improving on these things that we realized went wrong. They need to be able to walk out of that with a pat on the back and well done, instead of walking out of that with a bunch of like snarky comments and weird looks. That's my opinion.
Yeah.
And on leadership.
Yeah. This, like, so many cultures revolve around if I make a mistake, I might, like, my job is on the line here. And, we love to, especially as marketers, we love to think that, like, because again, it comes to like the over reliance on these platforms. You can tell who's actually out talking to the market, and you can tell who's just like winging it. Like, maybe this messaging will work. Maybe this positioning will work. Well, if you talk to your market, you talk to your customers and your prospects, you have real conversations with them instead of trying to pitch slap them out of their chair, you'll get the messaging and the positioning from them. They'll tell you exactly how you need to talk to them.
It's that thing we've done with some of our clients. Like, we don't do often advisory work, but the times we've done it, we come in there, and if they cannot figure out the value proposition, the first thing we tell them is, have you interviewed 10 of your current clients?
Yeah.
Everybody just snaps back like, what? Have you interviewed 10 of your current clients? And everybody goes, no. Okay, that's it. That's the first thing we do when we come in. Why? Because the current clients hold, the ones that stay and the ones that are satisfied, they hold the key to why they buy from you, because they stay.
It's funny. It reminds me of that publisher that we had as a client a few years ago. And the funny part about it is their issues it was so just like obvious, but it's like they didn't trust their internal instincts. And, I call this one retail store like, hey, this is Garrath from so-and-so. Just wanted to have a conversation. The guy that was running the region for that retail store, he's like, this is the first time in 15 years anybody's called me from your company. And I was asking him about a specific store. And by the way, you guys send this publication to my store every single week. We never sell any. We throw them out and you guys keep sending them. You keep sending a new edition every single week. Just removing that store alone, getting that perspective, I saved the company almost $100,000 for $10 million company, how many other retail locations were there out of a couple thousand where it's like 100,000 here, 100,000 there? Now, how much more money do you have to actually focus on your highest value customers, to build out the programs you have to build in order to remain competitive in this market? Because it's no longer, to go back to your point earlier, your brand is your ability to execute, deliver, support, retain, and continue to add value. That's your brand, And kind of going back to that platform I reached out to. I know everything I need to know about your brand by the fact it took you 2 weeks to reach back out to me. Like, how long am I going to have to wait for the information I need? How long am I going to have to wait for the support I need? How long am I going to have to wait for the resources I need? And it's so obvious. And this is actually a platform that multiple people have told me, hey, you guys should reach out to them because they have serious issues with how they actually execute sales. And yet this is a very well-known sales automation platform, especially in the B2B SaaS space. It's just mind-blowing.
They prove that to you. They prove that to you. Like, if you take 2 weeks to follow up with somebody, you have a sales issue. You have a sales culture issue. It's interesting. And I want to come back also to like the culture thing. There was this, I know you probably saw it, this scandal recently with the CEO of Astronomer. He got caught at the Coldplay concert with his lover that was the head of HR.
Yeah.
Something we need to be better at in companies is, as leaders and as people who oversee leaders, is accountability and responsibility. Meaning, if the company culture is, hey, we will punish you for mistakes, but then the CEO is able to throw away the company's reputation like that and not get immediately fired, but get suspended for an investigation when the entire evidence is there, it means there is a double standard. That's a terrible message to employees, because I bet if an employee breaks the rule of having relationships inside the company, they immediately get fired. But the CEO gets a pass for like an investigation. And my bet is, I don't work at Astronomer, so if somebody from Astronomer sees a clip from this and wants to get mad at me, feel free to. But my take there is that probably there is a double standard, and that kind of double standard is something that reflects itself at every layer of the organization. And that over time just promotes this culture of, hey, nobody's doing their best, because doing their best means we make mistakes, and make mistakes means you get fired unless you're in a higher position. And that's something that shouldn't be happening in any organization.
Isn't that funny how, when you put it in that context, that if people are actually trying, you're probably going to make mistakes more often than you're not. If you're in a culture where it's like everything we do, just like it works, either you've done a really good job at being able to execute, deliver, support, blah, 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 or you have a really low standard for what excellence or what winning actually looks like. Anybody can, execute on a low standard. Anybody, it, kind of comes back to a conversation I had last week where we were talking about the principles of leadership and how do you actually form culture. And most companies look at culture as a top-down function. The leaders set the culture. Well, the culture is ultimately based on the lowest acceptable standard, the lowest standard that you'll accept within the company. And collectively, each individual standards make up a company's culture. But we focus so much on tangibility, or we focus so much on what are their tangible skills? Do they look like the right person? Do they talk like the right person? This, that, and the other. But that doesn't tell you about anybody's standards. You have to uncover what their standards are, because when they have a crisis going on in their life, when there's a crisis going on in the company, etc., you're ultimately going to fall back on that lowest acceptable standard. So this is why you see so much of that yo-yo performance in companies. I was talking about this earlier. Camila asked me, how do you get a sales team to consistently perform at a high level? What if it's a sales team? Actually, let's transition real quick, because I think this is a good transition. I don't know if the algorithm was just like feeding me bullshit last week, but I saw like 5 posts on, these CEOs talking about like what an A player is. And one of the posts centered around like, we immediately identify the A players in our organization and we shift all of our resources accordingly. Okay, let's think about that for a minute. In the sense that it came down to this idea that like being an A player is a sum of traits that you're inherently born with or you're not. And that couldn't be further from the truth. A players are developed by good leaderships and good cultures. And you could easily be an A player in one culture, and because of the leadership in another, you could easily be a B or a C player. Because the thing about an A player is they won't put up with all the bullshit. At the end of the day, they're not going to put up with the bureaucracy. They're not going to put up with the political bullshit. They're not going to put up with not having the support they need to execute. And when that happens, and when you're in a culture like that, it burns you out, whether you're an A player or not. People get burnt out on that, and then they lose the passion that they have for their job. The role of the leadership team is to develop a culture where the C player can become a B player, where the B player can become an A player, not just, well, we have our A players and we shift all our resources
Also,
over to.
because it's just linked in wishful thinking. To
It
think that
is.
first of all, you can identify every A player and get them into your team. And no company has only A players. It
No.
doesn't exist. So
They'd like you to believe that, though.
they like you to believe
For
that,
you
but
to believe, could you imagine a culture where it was all A players?
nice utopia. It's not going to work out.
Yeah.
The issue is also that there are layers to saying that you will shift your resources to A players. You are communicating a lot of the wrong things. You are communicating that you don't like investing in your employees' growth because that means you stop investing in the B and C and D players. It means also that you are willing to tolerate that people underperform because you can put the burden on the ones that do perform. Like we can take this little statement that, okay, yes, we move all our resources into A players. We can take this little statement and pull a thread up until even ethics. So basically, you are exploiting these A players so that they can make up for the ones that you allow to be lazy because you are too lazy to invest in them because you tolerate that low standard. And again, we come back to the culture thing and to the fact that so many leaders put so much unnecessary pressure. Pressure is necessary, but the kind of pressure like don't make mistakes is a terrible type of, because think about it. Imagine you take the sales team and you tell them, I want you to have a close rate of at least 80% of the leads that come to the door. That sales team is going to put all their efforts into hyper qualifying. They're going to start lying. They're going to start making up data just to reach that unreachable standard of not making the mistake of failing to sell. When sales is the perfect example, because it is a business where as good as we can be and as good as we are in sales, you still lose more times than you win.
Yep.
And everybody's aware of that, but for some reason we cannot transfer that to other areas and business units of the company.
Yeah, I think that's a good stopping point on that, because I don't really think there's another argument to make there other than that's so, especially with the way that, people are today, how, you have to adjust to each individual's perspective. Again, it comes back to, are you giving people agency? Are you giving them ownership? Are you giving them the ability to make changes and adapt in real time? I think one of the things we should touch on is, what are some like BS go-to-market myths out there that you're seeing?
I'll let you start with that one, what I think.
Yeah, I think for me, the biggest one that has really just gotten under my skin the last couple of years, we're coming out of this whole, we look at the growth at all cost era as 2019 to 2022, maybe 2023, but really the growth at all cost era started in 2014, because that's when investor money started coming back into the SaaS market, coming back into the tech market. And before that, you kind of had the inbound era. And over time, the inbound era and the growth at all cost era kind of overlapped a little bit. And through that, we've had this like development of the whole sustainable growth mindset, which if you peek below the surface, it's really just predictable growth models repackaged. It's just repackaged BS that people are buying into blindly. And a lot of these narratives are like being pushed by, I don't know, think tanks. I think that's what some of them are calling themselves. Nobody's really questioning the premise or the ideology behind these things of like, when I don't know if I've ever been in a single company. Okay, let's remove the outliers of hyper growth companies that just hockey stick their way to 100 million or a billion, right? That's very, very few and far between. The other 99% of companies will never see that. Maybe for a quarter, maybe for two. You're not going to see that for 5 years. You're not going to see that for 3 years. And so this whole like sustainable growth narrative has kind of come out into the market. I think it's all bullshit, because 99% of the time, especially in the way the market develops today or evolves today, what was working 90 days ago is probably not going to work now. And you need the mindset that we have to constantly adapt. We have to constantly evolve. We constantly have to stay out ahead of the market. When you adopt that sustainable growth mindset, what does that tell the marketing team? What does that tell your sales team? You're almost living with this like plug and play attitude, almost this, well, if we just do the bare minimum, we'll get the results that we want. And it just does not work that way. And I think this comes back to why so many marketing teams are struggling right now to actually be that spearhead for the sales team, to actually drive consistent results at a high level, because that sustainable growth mindset just plays right into that support function mindset. They go hand in hand. And really what you need something that's modular. You need to be able to have a modular approach. Think of it like levers. You have different levers within the business that you know work, and then you have levers that you're going to test. But we have to be able to make, again, coming back to the whole frontline agency mindset, people have to be able to pull those levers in real time and shift resources into where the highest value opportunities are. This idea that we're still just going to create these inbound and outbound engines. We were talking to a company last week, and what did they talk to us about? Setting up nurture tracks. I'm like, that's what you're going to rely on for your core engagement, nurture tracks. In 2025, we're talking about nurture tracks.
That failed so hard in the past years from older clients before we walked in.
Yeah.
And you remember this, like many cases of these companies that they set up like this email sequence. There are email sequences, okay? Nurture tracks.
Exactly.
It's an
Yeah.
email sequence. Just call it what it is, first of all. But no, nurture tracks. Let's nurture this lead. They downloaded a white paper. Cool. You
Yeah.
send them emails for like 3 months, and you think that they are somewhat warm leads still. They are as cold as an ice cube.
Yeah.
Keep acting like these people are still there because you send them emails that they once downloaded something. It's not how it works. Another competitor just swooped them up probably month 2 and they forgot to unsubscribe to your thing.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, you're better off. So many companies are hesitant to do this. You're better off creating high value experiences. Maybe that only happens once a month, or maybe that only happens once a quarter. You're better off creating high value experiences for those prospects that they'll actually remember than that 80-page ebook that they read the first 2 pages of and decided this is dog shit. I'm just going to throw it out. You know, I mean, that's the reality of it. In my entire career, I have never heard a prospect say, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe you've heard this because I have not. I've never heard a prospect say, you know, we were sitting at the table and we were deciding which vendor we were going to go with. And we thought that ebook that you guys put out was
things that never happened.
That
Added to
ebook
the
got
list of
us over
things
the
that
line.
never happened because it doesn't happen. Meaning,
Yeah.
like, you know, is the whole thing also with SWAT. Like one of the reasons SWAT exists is because we need to stop treating buyers as if they were not human, as if they were different than us. To any of you B2B salespeople and marketers, how many of the reports that you have downloaded on your own initiative were from companies that you ended up buying from, that you wanted to buy from? Probably like 1%. Even if you bought from them. Wait. Even if you bought from them, did you ever download and actually read the full thing?
Absolutely not.
Absolutely.
You know why they still exist? Comes back to what you were talking about earlier. It's the cover your ass mindset. Look, we put this ebook out. We got 20 qualified leads from it this quarter. Okay, how many of those converted? None of them. You know why? Because most of the people downloading that freaking ebook is the marketing manager straight out of college who's just trying to sharpen their education and their knowledge. They don't have real buying authority. They don't have agency when it comes to making decisions on what platforms we're going to go with. And so that could be another thing that still plays out. I think we would actually, maybe we do an episode just on the cover your ass mentality and all of the reciprocal effects that happen because of that, of, you know, you still see so many CMOs like so focused on MQL generation. And it's all downstream effect of the predictable growth mindset. We need to get to
I'm fine with MQLs, right? I'm fine with MQLs, but if the qualification criteria is they pressed a button to download a paper that they didn't read, that's not qualified at all.
No, dude, I was at a company where form fills were considered MQLs. And when I actually challenged our CMO on it, I almost got put into a witch hunt, my man. And it was like the first time anybody had actually challenged this CMO on the idea of why are we qualifying form fills as an MQL? Like how do we know that marketing, because they can't, for all we know, it's some guy in India who's just trying to see how our lead gen platform performs and upsell us on something. We don't get
competitor.
Yeah. I'm a big believer that you have to lead with the SQL model. Like, especially if you're a sales-led organization. Sales should be doing the qualification. Marketing should be creating the experiences, the interest, the demand, and setting the programs in place to capture that demand. That comes back to, in the best organizations I've been in, marketing is a spearhead, not a support function. And, this is why CEOs don't trust CMOs. This is why it's not because they just, so many CMOs struggle with the operator mindset. That's a part of it. But when you optimize for activities over impact, you can't prove ROI. You can't. There's no tangible proof that what you're doing is actually impacting the organization. And that's why at the end of every fiscal year, who does the CFO, who does the CEO, whose budget do they want to slash first? Marketing. It's a tale as old as time. And it's because people won't shift their perspective. They get locked in these information bubbles of predictable growth, sustainable growth, etc. You got to get out of that mindset. It has to be, we got to be able to adapt. And we can't have a rigid playbook that we run. Maybe content marketing works best for you, but that can't be your only play that you're like really pushing your resources into. Maybe sales led works for you. Maybe inbound led, whatever it may be. You still have to have a modular approach because inbound might work this quarter. It might not work next quarter. How are you going to adapt when the market slaps you in the face? And a lot of people don't have the answer to that question. It's almost like we're afraid to talk about what if this fails. Again, it comes back to your point about culture, how that's driven by a culture of agency, ownership, accountability. And without those things, nobody's really going to push the envelope on innovation. Those small moments, being able to act on these opportunities within. There's a saying out there, you have to act on an opportunity within the lifetime of an opportunity. And in today's world, sometimes those opportunities might be 24 hours long.
It moves too fast. Everything moves too fast.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. It's the same argument we keep it's a dead horse we keep beating even with the sales talk. It's like, why are you still, I understand there is a lot of value to Sandler because he taught a bunch of people who completely lacked empathy how to build rapport. And I'm going to be controversial here. I think, and I'm not sure because this just came into my brain, but I do think that Sandler teach a bunch of people who had zero empathy how to build rapport, and that's why it became so popular. Now, It is still one of the most valid out there. I don't want to take a dump on Sandler. It is still super valid, but why are we still running bands? Why are we still running all these sales models that were built in an era where the internet wasn't there, where phones barely existed? Everything changed around us. The buyers have changed, and somehow we expect the same old things to keep working. We expect bands to be a proper qualification method. We expect MQL to still be a proper way to measure the quality of a lead. The definition of insanity is repeating the same thing over and over again, even though you don't get any positive results. Sometimes in B2B, I've noticed we apply the definition of insanity consistently and successfully, and that has to stop.
Yeah. All right. I say we end this on giving out a tip, just a tip of how you can improve sales right now. What can you go do this week or today that will give you better insights or better leverage, or just improve your execution 1%? You go first.
I'm not going to steal your time of response thing. So I'm going to say, if you want to improve your sales results, in one tip simply is, as a leader, you don't have the time to walk every day into a sales meeting and lay out the vision and lay out how they are connected to the customer experience. But there is one thing you can do, which is every day, if you have a sales stand-up, use that. If you don't, use whatever meeting you have daily with your sales team and read 3 to 5 customer testimonials from happy people that were extremely glad to work with your company and got great results. Why? Because that will connect your sales reps to the end result they are providing, will make them feel part of the customer experience, and as a nice side effect, it will make them more confident and more motivated to sell the thing they sell because they will see the tangible results. Because it's easier for sales guy to just move fast from deal to deal to deal to deal and lose track of, okay, how is this panning out in the last 6 months? What did we actually achieve for these people that we got money from? So read those customer reviews to them as often as you can, ideally every day. Do that for 30 days and enjoy the results.
I love it. Easy. It's easy. That's easy. I don't know what an excuse on that could be of well, I don't have time to read 3 customer testimonials. Buddy, that's an excuse. Mine would be, if you're a marketing director, you're a CMO, right? At the end of every week, the end of every quarter, whatever works best for you, get your team together and review your 10 best deals for the quarter. Why did the deal go through? What source did they come from? What actually got the deal over the line? What was the value of the deal? What kind of company were they in? What was the size of the company? What are the leadership attributes of the person who signed off on the deal? What were their core concerns? It takes 10 minutes to review each deal. Set aside an hour and 90 or an hour and 30 minutes. Review 10 deals. Same thing with your marketing team. Get them that frontline clarity on what they need to go out and execute, to understand the end user who's actually going to be using the product and the buyer who's actually going to be signing off on the deal. A lot of frontline marketing managers rarely ever, I remember as a marketing ops manager, I get the leads in, but I never actually see what happens when the deal closes. I never sit in on these sales calls. That's another thing. Tip 2, 1A, Tip 2, whatever you want to call it. Marketing should be sitting in on sales calls at least once a week. Each marketer should be sitting in on at least 2 or 3 calls. Doesn't have to take 3 hours of your time. It could be 2 30-minute calls. Set aside an hour a week, an hour a month, whatever it is. Sit in on sales calls and understand how those conversations are going. Understand what pain points that people are bringing up and what their real concerns are. Because you're not going to frickin' solve that in an ebook. That's my final.
I love that.
Get off my soapbox now.
Damn, I think we carried this to an hour, longer than we expected, probably.
I know.
Great. It's gonna make for some great clips, hopefully. This was, I guess, episode 1 of Durindal HQ. I don't know when this will be out, probably soon. If anybody listened to this, thank you. If you didn't, no issue. We're still small, but you will hear from us. And then you will listen. See you in the future. See you in 5 years if you're listening, just because you notice we are very successful now. And if you're not listening, well, you're lost. Garrath, let's do it again next week.
Yeah, brother. See you soon.
See you soon.